You guys ready to start? Here we go. Everybody get on your Peloton. That's the wrong class. We're talking about dinosaurs, and we're starting off with fossils. Now, the word fossil in Latin means to dig. And a long time ago, everything that was dug up to them was a fossil. But now we recognize a fossil as something that has been preserved or converted into a mineral, and it's something from the past. It's pretty simple, and a lot of things can become a fossil. Plants can become a fossil, fish, dinosaurs, obviously dinosaurs, all sorts of stuff. Well, there's a couple of different ways things become fossilized. So let's talk about the first one, and that is something called complete preservation. Now, it's a little more rare. Okay, let me back up. When an animal dies, its body begins to decompose. Now, decomposition means, I'm trying to get in a spot where the reflection coming under my garage doesn't interfere with my glasses, because I know that's disturbing. When an animal dies, the soft tissue decomposes. Soft tissue means skin, hair. Notice I didn't use my head as my example for hair. I could have used the hair in my ears, I guess. Skin, hair, feathers, those are things that decompose. Decomposition is where bacteria, things you and I can't see with our eye, actually begin to eat away and digest it. Here's an at-home experiment if you guys want to see decomposition in action. Take a piece of bread, sprinkle a couple of drops of water on it, not very much, just 1 or 2 drops of water. Put that bread in a Ziploc bag. You do not have to seal it if you don't want to, but you can if you want. You can seal it as well. And then set that bread in an area that doesn't get a lot of sunlight. And every morning when you wake up, go check the bread and see what's beginning to happen to it, because you're going to be witnessing decomposition. Well, decomposition what happens, things decompose. But the bones of the animal are what's ultimately left. Now, not everything becomes a fossil. To become a fossil, those bones have to be preserved, because if they lay on the surface and the sun shines on them every day, those bones become brittle and they basically turn to dust and they're gone. Not everything that lived a long time ago is a fossil. The only thing that becomes a fossil are things that are buried. That's what a fossil is, something that has been buried or preserved. So, one of the ways things can become preserved is called complete preservation, and this is kind of rare. Complete preservation are things like animals that get stuck in tar, like the La Brea tar pits in California. That's a good thing to research. Go and Google La Brea tar pits and take a look. They have a great website, and they'll explain how that happens. The animal is sucked into that tar, and that stops the decomposition process. It helps preserve it. Ice is another thing that does it, and this is kind of cool. You know, in Siberia, Russia, they actually find frozen mammoths and frozen woolly rhinos. Well, the ice that they are preserved in has stopped the decomposition, and therefore everything is preserved. For instance, hang on, trying to find my camera, trying to angle it. Ladies and gentlemen, what you are looking at is woolly mammoth hair. That is actual, real hair from a woolly mammoth. This little thing up in the corner, that's a piece of mammoth tusk. Now, this animal was trapped in ice in Siberia about 10 to 20,000 years ago, and yet we still have their hair. Why do we have their hair? Because decomposition was stopped. The ice prevented the bacteria from dissolving it. If that mammoth had died out in the open and no ice covered it, it would have been dissolved, the hair would have been gone, there would be nothing left. Another example of a complete preservation, amber. This is a piece of tree sap that is about 23 million years old. And anything trapped in that amber is going to become preserved. We find things like bugs and flowers and leaves and grasshoppers and all sorts of lizards. Something else they found, a piece of tail of a dinosaur. Yes, an actual piece of dinosaur tail was preserved. We even find feathers. So complete preservation is one way that things can become preserved, and we can find them. Another thing is called carbonization. Now, carbonization happens when some nasty stuff, caustic material. What is caustic? Well, caustic is, have you ever had a toy that ran on a battery and you didn't play with it for a long, long time, and then one day you opened up the compartment where the battery was and it's all full of this white, chalky, corroded stuff? That's because a battery is caustic. If you want to see what caustic is, when this class is over, ask your mom or dad to take you outside and open up the hood of the car and look at your battery and look at the two cables that connect to the battery. And when you see them, chances are you're going to see a white, powdery, crunkly stuff all over it. That is because that is a caustic reaction. Well, sometimes that happens through things in the ground that will dissolve and destroy the fossil. But it leaves behind a very thin layer of carbon. And an example of that are ferns, plants. Here is a fossilized plant that dates back about 65 million years ago. Now, this is no longer a leaf. This is carbon. This is what's left over after. Look how wafer thin that is. Can you see? Let me turn it this way. Can you see how thin? It doesn't even leave a mark. It's so paper thin. It's because a caustic reaction has affected that plant and dissolved it, but left behind a wafer thin layer of carbon. And that's how fossil plants are often preserved. Again, that's a caustic reaction. And then there's something called a trace fossil. A trace fossil is not the actual animal itself. It is evidence of the animal that has been turned to stone. And an example of that is a dinosaur footprint. Ooh. All right, kids, you want to trick your parents? All right, all you parents, cover your ears. You're not allowed to hear this. This is for you kids. It's going to be hilarious. When you look at the footprint of a dinosaur, it always shows 3 toes, at least for this meat eater. But they actually have 5 toes. It's just 2 of the toes don't reach the ground. They don't touch the ground. So when you see a picture of a dinosaur footprint, you usually see 3 toes, but they actually have 5. Now, here's the trick to play on your mom and dad. When this class is over, ask your parents to go online and find a picture of a dinosaur footprint. And when you do, ask them, hey, how many toes do you think that animal had? And your parents are going to look at the picture and say, 3. And you'll go, ha ha ha. I should be the teacher, you should be the student, because I know more than you. A footprint is preserved. Okay, parents, you can uncover your ears and come back to listening. A footprint is not the animal itself, but it is a trace fossil. It's turned to stone, it's rock, but this isn't the animal. This is a footprint where the animal walked by. Now, how does that happen? A dinosaur, let's use a dinosaur, can walk through the mud and leave a footprint. And then that mud can bake in the sunlight very, very hard. And then over time, layers of dirt bury it, and that footprint remains, and it's like the weight of that dirt squeezes the mud and turns it into stone. And that traps the footprint in it. So this is an example of a trace fossil. Other trace fossils include things like dinosaur poop. That's not the real dinosaur, but yes, that stuff can become a fossil, and it is called a coprolite. Now, those are some of the ways things can become fossilized, but the one that's the most common, and the one we're going to focus on, is called permineralization. Permineralization. Big words, but they mean something. Basically, the way something is permineralized is water, either from rain from above, or from ground sources coming up. Water picks up little pieces of mineral. Let me show you what I mean. Hang on. Hang on here. I know I have some dirt somewhere in here. Here. Yes, that's a handful of dirt, but it's also a handful of minerals. You don't see them, but they're in there. Minerals are solids that are found throughout the world. They're in dirt, they're in everything. Well, some minerals, when water touches them, the mineral will turn into a liquid. It's still there, but it's turned into a liquid. And then when it dries, it turns back to a solid. Well, over time, as the bone is buried under the ground, little droplets of water come raining down from above, and the little droplet of water is working its way down through the soil. Now the water is kind of greedy, and it's grabbing the minerals in the ground. Water loves to take minerals and be like, oh, you're mine, baby, I'm taking minerals. So this droplet of water is filled with minerals, and it's still going happy as can be. Now, if that droplet of water touches our dinosaur bone, the water gets absorbed into the bone because the bone is sort of like a sponge. And that little droplet of water comes in. Well, the bone steals away the minerals from the droplet of water. It's like, yoink, these are mine. The water keeps going and comes out the other side and be like, I do not like dinosaur bones because they steal minerals. Well, the bone begins to slowly over time, all the little holes in the bone, more and more of those minerals that were liquid are slowly becoming a solid. And as that happens, it's filling up the bone. Let me give you an example. Here is a dinosaur bone. Now, when this dinosaur was alive, that was hollow, and that ring didn't exist, and this was all kind of a spongy looking bone material. But over time, little droplets of water came down filled with their liquid minerals, and that got soaked into the bone. The water passed all the way through, but the bone stole away the minerals. And little by little, this became stone. This is not the bone anymore. It is minerals that have turned back to a solid and took the shape of the bone. This is exactly what the bone looked like. The only difference is, this is not a bone. This is now stone, and that's what a fossil usually is stone. Well, then you may say, okay, so if I put this in water, does it disappear because it's made of minerals? The answer to that is no, because it will only turn to a liquid so many times, and then sooner or later it will no longer do it. And once it's filled up with minerals, no more water gets to go inside because now the minerals have stopped more water from coming in. So here is your science experiment to recreate permineralization. All you need is a sponge. You can even use these with this rough back, it doesn't matter. The sponge is going to act like our dinosaur bone. Parents, you want to have real fun? Take a pair of scissors and cut it into the shape of a bone. Looks cooler that way. If you do not have a sponge in your house, no big whoop, because you can do this with a piece of paper, like a paper towel, or you can do it with a regular dish towel. Now, what do we need for our experiment? Well, we got the bone. Now, we need the mineral. And one of the minerals that works best is salt. Salt is a mineral. Ooh. Salt is a mineral. And when it gets into water, it dissolves. But it's still there. How do we know? Because if you took a glass of water and sprinkled salt and drank it, it'd make you sick because the salt's still there. So what you need is a container, and you place your dinosaur bone into the container. You take a glass, fill it with water, and start adding salt. Start adding salt. And you can continue to add salt. Stir it up. Now, after a while, and by the way, I wouldn't use a salt shaker because you're going to want to add a lot of water. What I would recommend, if it's easier, is to either take the lid off your salt shaker because you're going to pour a lot in there. But if you're going to stand there all day and do this, give it to your dad. Make your dad salt shaker. Dads love that. He'll have a project. He won't leave. All day long, he'll be standing there. I'm adding salt to the water. So, you add salt to your water and you stir it up. And you keep adding salt and you keep adding salt until ultimately it will no longer dissolve. That salt will no longer dissolve. You're going to have a big thick goo in the bottom of it. That means that the water has taken as much mineral as it can have. I told you water was greedy, but it also has a limit. Your little droplets of water are going to be like, dude, I've got so much salt, I think my blood pressure's gone up. That's an adult joke. You'll die laughing when you get older at that. So, you keep adding salt until finally, when you stir it up, it just won't stir up anymore. Now, you take your dinosaur bone, or your piece of paper, or your dish towel, and you pour that salty water all over it. Pour it all over it. Empty it. Even the gooey stuff in the bottom if you want to put that on there. And then you do not touch the bone. You're going to set this on a windowsill and you're going to let it dry. What's going to happen is Just like in a real bone, there are tiny cell structures in a real bone. Your salt water droplets have gone into the bone. The water is going to evaporate. It's going to be gone. What do you think is going to be left behind now in your dinosaur bone? Once the bone is completely dry, take a pair of scissors and cut it open and look inside. And what you'll see is some of those little holes are going to have salt crystals in them, because the salt is going to turn back into a solid and it's going to start to fill it. Well, if you did that experiment for, I don't know, let's say 20,000 years, sooner or later, your sponge will have decomposed. There's not even going to be any sponge, but what you're going to have behind is a block of salt that has the identical shape, including all those little holes that you saw in the sponge. They're going to be there. So that is how you can recreate permineralization, and that is how you can make a dinosaur bone and explain how it works. It's very simple to do. For those of you that don't have a sponge, again, no big whoop, just pour it on a paper towel or on a dish towel and let that sit out there and dry. What you're going to find when it dries is the salt crystals will be on top. They will be inside, but you can't cut it to see inside. But it still demonstrates the exact same thing. So, now you know how a dinosaur bone can become a fossil. Now we got to talk about how does it get buried. I used that term. I said it has to be buried underground. Well, was there like little guys that walked around with shovels and, hey, there's a dead dinosaur, let's bury him? No, that's something called erosion. Erosion is where dirt and rock are moved by things around them. Wind can move dirt. Floods can move dirt. Glaciers, giant sheets of ice, can literally push and move dirt. So if you're the animal and you die and you are, your bones are exposed. Now remember what's going to happen. If you're not covered, they're going to turn to dust. But if you get buried underground, that dirt is going to protect the bone from Mr. Sun. It's not going to become brittle, and over time. Now, even if it gets buried, usually there's still bacteria. It's still going to eat away and dissolve the flesh and skin and all that. Not always, but most of the time. So, how do we move dirt? Well, let's talk about it. When I first figured out which class I wanted to do, I had found the coolest location with really neat lines, almost like history, but unfortunately had to do it indoors. So I created the side of a hill. Layers of dirt are like pages of a book. It is a history book of life on Earth. Each layer of dirt is brought in by different events. For instance, a flood. Well, let's imagine that we're living before the age of dinosaurs, in this layer right here. You and I can walk on this layer. There's nothing above us but the beautiful sky. And you and I are walking along here, and we see an animal, a crocodile, and it dies. It's dead. Now, tomorrow is a very windy day, and the wind is blowing, and it's coming from that direction, and it's blowing dirt this way. And here's our dead alligator, or crocodile. And as the wind blows, the dirt begins to pile up. Let me show you what I mean. Here I have a hill of dirt, and here's a Tyrannosaurus Rex tooth. How does erosion cover that? Well, my brush is going to be, this is the wind. We're going to pretend this is the wind or the rain. The wind is blowing, and as the wind is blowing, it's beginning to cover our T-Rex tooth, right? The wind is covering our T-Rex tooth. Now it rains and the water begins to run, and the water starts to come in, and little by little, our beautiful T-Rex tooth has just been buried by erosion. It's there, but it's covered and it's protected. So, suddenly, when you and I were standing here, now there's more dirt than there was before. And everything that was caught under it is buried. Now, this big, thick layer, that usually means something big happened. Why are some layers thin? Why are they different colors? It's because of erosion. Erosion is bringing rocks and minerals from other places and leaving them in a new spot. Maybe those rocks and minerals were a different color than the ones that were here before. And that's why you see different bands and different colors. Now, this one is very thick, and that means something really big happened. And that means that maybe that was, let's say it was a landslide. That's a way something can get buried. Let's say there was a big mountain and it just collapsed and all that dirt came rushing in and covered over everything. So our fossil of our crocodile is way down here underneath. Now, this is the age of dinosaurs. Now we have dinosaurs walking around, Tyrannosaurus Rex and Ankylosaurus. And by the way, tomorrow's class is all about dinosaur families. So if you really like dinosaurs, tune in tomorrow, 10 o'clock, same time as this one, and you will see it's nothing but dinosaurs tomorrow, dinosaur families. So, now dinosaurs are here. Now when a dinosaur dies and it gets buried by erosion, its bones are going to be down here somewhere. And now we have this gray layer. What caused that? Volcanoes. Volcanoes maybe caused that. Or an asteroid could have caused that. Friday's class is on extinction. We're going to talk in detail about the asteroid. Excuse me. We're going to talk about the asteroid in Friday's show. Friday's show is on extinction. You want to tune in for that. And then there's a layer of black dirt. Well, where did that come from? It could have come from miles and miles and miles away. It could have been another volcano that erupted hundreds of miles away. Do you know, I know some of you are from Nebraska, do you know that a volcano that erupted in Wyoming, the ash that went up in the air traveled all the way and came down in Nebraska, covered Nebraska in ash. So those are examples of how erosion can do that. And then we have other lines, and now we have these big boulders up there. Well, how does a boulder get moved? I'll tell you how. It can happen over a long time where they slowly move. Sheets of ice can push boulders ahead of it and move these big rocks. Things like tsunamis can move rocks the size of a car or a building. Earthquakes can do it. Tornadoes can do it. So all of these things come together to cause erosion and can bring in different layers and bury our animals. So how do I find one then? Can I find a dinosaur in my backyard? Well, this is the layer of dinosaurs. You and I are living up here. How do we get there? We use erosion. Because erosion is the friend of a paleontologist. And here's what I mean. Remember how, there's our T-Rex tooth. Remember how erosion is slowly taking dirt from one place to another? Well, if it's removing the dirt in one place and it's burying some... What's that? What is that? That, my friends, is a raptor claw. You see, buried under my pile of dirt was a raptor claw. Now, the wind was blowing this way and it was burying our friend the Tyrannosaurus Rex. But unbeknownst to me, there was a raptor claw buried, and erosion has uncovered it. And now I have the ability to go in and find it, because now I can see it. See, if you and I are up here, we can't see what's under the ground. We don't know what's down there. I don't know what's here or here or here or here or here. I don't know. I have to rely on erosion to start taking away some of those layers. Remember, erosion is where we move things. It moves dirt from one place to the other place. And so erosion also uncovers things. And that's exactly what happens. So scientists, if they want to find a dinosaur, they learn through, my mind just went blank. Geologists, how crazy is that? Geologists will tell us how old the layers are we're standing. Let's imagine for a moment that erosion takes this layer and moves it over here. What does that do? It uncovers the layers underneath it. Let me use this side. Erosion moves this away. it uncovers the layers below. And if this is the layer that has the dinosaur bones, I have to hope that erosion takes these away so I can walk in that spot and look for the bones. Do you have dinosaur bones in your backyard? You might, but they may be buried so deep underground. And by the way, for you little guys that are thinking about grabbing a shovel and digging a hole in your mom's backyard, not a good idea unless you got her permission. But even if you do that, you can't necessarily find anything, because what if there's only a bone here, but you live here, you dig and you dig and you dig all the way down here, you don't find anything. That happens. So there's ways to find out what kind of fossils are in your area. There is a book, I do not have a copy with it, but it's called The Roadside Guide to Geology, and I think there's one for every state in the United States. So it says, there's like one that says Roadside Guide to Texas Geology, Roadside Guide to Oklahoma Geology. In those books, they will tell you how old each area of your state is and what sorts of things you may be able to find. You may be standing, like right now, I could take all of you with me and I could go outside and we could find fossilized seashells. Why? Because erosion has taken away the layers, and the layer I'm standing on in San Antonio, Texas, used to be the floor of the ocean. That's the layer that I have access to, so that's what I find. If I want to find dinosaur bones in Texas, I have to go either to the Dallas area or I have to go out to the Big Bend area. If you're in Nebraska and you go to an area called Ashfall, there you're going to find mammals that came after the age of dinosaurs, because the layer you're standing on is here, not down here. If you live in Montana or Wyoming or Utah or Colorado, South Dakota, those are the places where erosion has done the most good. All right. I'm trying to keep these classes to about 30 minutes because I know you all have so much work you need to get done, and I know you've got other things to do. Tomorrow's class starts at 10 o'clock, same time. That class is going to be on dinosaurs. I'll explain what is a dinosaur and what is not a dinosaur, and then I'll talk about the individual family groupings of those dinosaurs. So that should be a lot of fun. On Friday, the class is going to be on extinction events, including the one we think caused the extinction of the dinosaurs. Now, I'm going to hang around and I'll be able to try to answer as many questions as I can. I don't know how many people are on the call. It looks like 670 right now. So because there's so many people on, I won't be able to answer everyone. I will post this afternoon on the Dinosaur George Jr. page a book that I wrote, or a booklet I wrote, called An Educator's Guide to Paleontology. All of the things I'm teaching you are in that. It's going to be a PDF file. It's completely free for everyone. Now, I wrote that about 10 years ago, so there's some new changes that have occurred that I don't have time to go back and update it. But I hope you teachers can use it, and I hope it comes in handy for you. And lastly, somebody asked me, what's the difference between the Dinosaur George page and Dinosaur George Jr. page? Here's the difference. The Dinosaur George page is used to help promote where we're going to be, where I'm speaking, where our traveling museum is going. Now, you also find articles on there about dinosaurs, and you find cool information and a lot of fun stuff. The Dinosaur George Jr. page, the one you're on now, this page is nothing but short videos and images of animals, and it's all information about the animals themselves. Not about where I'm going to be or any of that stuff. It's really focusing more on the animals themselves. So if you're not a member of the Dinosaur George page, I do recommend you like that and follow that, because you get some great information. And be a member of both, because you're getting two different things, okay? And finally, we're not as active on those pages now because, again, I've had to lay everybody off. But you will see some things going on there as well. I hope you all enjoyed this class. I've enjoyed teaching it. Now, class is dismissed. You may go do your science experiments. Look up La Brea tar pits. Go outside and look for an example of caustic. Try to recreate your decomposition and get started on your sponge dinosaur bone. And I hope you guys enjoyed this.